Hare Krishna, everybody. Okay. So today we're going to read from the Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada said, I only know Bhagavad Gita. He said, because I know Bhagavad Gita, I can defeat anybody. So, you know, sometimes we say we've read Bhagavad Gita, let's move on. But actually, everything's in there. And we have to patiently sift out and apply it. And then it actually, that's real Bhagavad Gita. by sifting and applying. And then it becomes realized, and it changes the heart. The whole purpose of devotional service is to change the heart. And, material life makes the heart hard. We become impervious, almost impervious. And so the gradual process of devotional service is reversing that. And so it takes time. Prabhupada says, if we're for the rigid practitioner, success is assured. And so we should actually be very, very determined in this lifetime to put everything into it. If we're going to actually do anything, then do it for Krishna. And the result will be unlimited. Otherwise, we'll be disappointed. So I'm going to read, with this title of this particular talk is called Pursuing Happiness, in Pursuance of Happiness. And so that's our natural proclivity to pursue happiness. And so, when we come to a process which tends to, in the beginning, it seems like it may be starting to take some of the things away that we thought would make us happy. And there may be some, rebellion, or we may be thinking twice. But we should rest assured that if we know the process, we can overcome this this wrong way of thinking, the uninformed way of thinking. We're like spiritual children. Just like a child, he doesn't know what's good for him, but the parents, make sure that he does the things which will be good for him in the long run, not just immediately satisfy his whims and fancies. So the material world's like that. We have many whims and fancies. And, generally people are trained in that way to follow the whims and fancies. But what do they have to do in order to do that? They have to work so hard. And so, without any austerity or some control of our lives, then we can't achieve anything materially or spiritually. And so, we have to know how to pursue happiness and what is happiness. And so I thought I'd start with one verse from the Bhagavad Gita. This is from the second chapter, and it's the 57th verse, actually. And I'll just recite this. Yatsavatrana vishnehas tat prapya shubham shubham nabinandati nadveshti tasya pragya pratishtita. I'll just say once more. Yaksavatrana vishnehas tat prapya shubha shubham nabinandati nadveshti tasya pragya pratishtita. Ya, one who, sarvatra, everywhere, and a vishneha, with affection, tat, that, prapya, achieving, shubha, good, ashubham, evil, na, never, abhinandati, praises, na, never, dveshti, envies, tasya, his, pragya, perfect knowledge, pratishtita, fixed. Okay. So, translation. In the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. Purport. There is always some upheaval in the material world, which may be good or evil. One who is not agitated by such upheavals or material upheavals, who is unaffected by good and evil, is to be understood to be fixed in Krishna consciousness. As long as one is in the material world, there is always a possibility of good and evil. This world is full of duality, but one who is fixed in Krishna consciousness is not affected by good and evil, because he is simply concerned with Krishna, who is all good, absolute. Such consciousness in Krishna situates one in perfect transcendental position, called technically samadhi. Om Gyantimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Melitam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svavedantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Scha Sri Rupam Sarvajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Tadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakam Vitam Scha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabando Jagatpate Gopecha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavanishvari Vrishavanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasili Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Yatshva Sarvachana Vishne Hastata Prapya Shubha Shubham Navidandati Natveshti Tashi Pragya Pratishtita. In the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. If something's happening to us and there's nothing we can do about it, at least immediately, why complain? Why would we complain? Well, we do. Because we think we can actually change it by complaining. We don't understand actually what's happening. You know, different philosophers have different ways of explaining this creation, how it works. In the Bhagavatam, it says sometimes people call it karma. This is the cause. Some people say it's nature, material nature, that's the cause. Some people say it's activity, like this. And they're all right to some degree. These things are all creating our situation. Some say it's what astronomy or, it's our charts, it's our stars. Who can argue that these things, these are sciences which are correct? And people, therefore, they go to the astrologer and they take advice how to, change things. But unfortunately, it doesn't make much difference. We have, because actually it's under the auspice of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. These action and reactions in this material world are actually sanctioned by the Supreme Lord. And anything which is not sanctioned by him, it won't happen. So ultimately, he's the supreme doer. we may perform activities by which we get results. This is one doer. You know, the material energy will reciprocate by giving us a reaction. But if Krishna doesn't want that to happen, then there'll be no reaction. And so this gives a clue to actually the way to go. You know, it's like going into the ocean and big waves are coming, and we stand steadfast and we try to, you know, try to stop the wave knocking us over, as if we're like King Canute, a famous English king. He's from Denmark, I think. Is that right? Got any historians here? And you know, from Denmark, you know, I don't know what. But anyway, he sat on the shore of the ocean, and on his throne, and he expected the ocean to stop at his feet, but it, you know, unfortunately, it didn't. So it's like that. We can't control anything. So if we want to control things, we have to know who's the controller. Mami Vamsho, what is that word? Nine. Ayadakshena prakriti surite sacharatram etonane kuntya jagat biparivartate. So Krishna's controlling everything. So the whole point is to take shelter of the controller. Well, this is not a process that we may be able to do immediately. Some people may be. He said, Krishna is the supreme controller of all these things. So therefore, it's just like I gave a story, I think, a few weeks ago. I'm not sure it was on this forum or not, but everybody can remember being young. And, you know, and we were under the protection of the parents. So this brings a nice story. There was once one of my friends, he was on a voyage across the ocean. And the wind started building up, the waves started building up, and the boat started to rock. And then, you know, it became gale force. And so the ship was in difficulty. It was being tossed like a little match in the ocean. Huge waves on both sides. And at some point, everybody thought, this is it, this ship's going down. There's no other alternative. And so they were very much in anxiety and distraught. And everybody was panicking. And my friend noticed one little boy who was sat, just, you know, he wasn't affected. He was just playing, like, as if nothing was happening. And he was actually, he couldn't understand this. And so eventually, you know, actually the storm subsided and everybody was relieved. And so at that point, he took the opportunity to go to this little boy and he said, you know, everybody was completely, you know, frightened of this situation, but you seem to be very undisturbed. He says, what was the reason? He didn't seem to be frightened. And he looked at my friend, he said, why should I be frightened? My father's here. In other words, he was completely convinced that while his father was there, that he was safe. And that's actually the ultimate, or one of the ultimate, that's one of the key crossroads in Krishna consciousness. You know, Krishna consciousness is a process of increasing faith. Adoshrada in the beginning, and then we associate with those who have faith, and then we practice, and then we start to become freed from material consciousness, and then we become determined, and then we get a taste, and we become attached to that taste, attached to Krishna, and then the heart starts to, remember we were saying in the beginning, the heart starts to soften. And that is called bhava. We experience spiritual emotions. And as those emotions become concentrated, it develops into pure love. So this is the process. the process of increasing faith. Whatever little faith we have, it's a priceless commodity. Lord Chaitanya, or Lord Nityananda said, I'm selling the holy name in the marketplace. And what is that? What's the price? He says, your faith, your sincere desire to have it. So this is devotional service. There's nothing to stop us. He said he's just waiting for a tear to well up in the eye when we're chanting the holy name. Not a crocodile tear, but a real one. And then he says, I give that person all my blessings. Because at that point, we've actually started to appreciate devotional service. We have starting to develop some, appreciation of Krishna. And so that's one of the main focuses in devotional service, to start appreciating what we have, appreciating Krishna. Then we can reciprocate with Krishna. But the heart has to be softened, and in the beginning, that's not necessarily as easy as we would like, because it requires tapasya. It means doing things which we wouldn't ordinarily want to do. But who's free from tapasya? Is anybody free from sacrifice and tapasya? Just look at the situation in the world. Everybody's working like crazy just for a few hours of enjoyment at the weekend, or a few hours of enjoyment in the evening. 8, 9, 10 and more, all with the hope of happiness. But do we actually experience happiness? What do we experience? When we're at work, we're thinking about what we should do when we're free from work. When we're outside of work, people talk about work. That was my experience before I came to the movement. It's called, accepting and rejecting, sankalpa. We're accepting situation, rejecting. This is the mind, and we're never actually in the present. We're always thinking there's something better. Can you imagine how this brings peace? So we have to become like this little boy, completely dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is the process which, we can't, we don't have sight of the Supreme Personality of Godhead physically. So how do we see God? How do we see Krishna? We see him through Shastra. And then when we actually apply Shastra, we actually start to perceive. We may not see with the eyes. We hear we see with the ears. What's that verse in the Bhagavatam? I can't remember. There's one nice verse in the Bhagavatam. What's the word for hearing? For ear? Sanskrit word.
Shrinvatam.
Not Shrimatam, no. That means beautiful, doesn't it? Sushinam. That's a Brahmin, isn't it? Anyway, we see through the ears. We see through the ears. And then we start to understand Krishna, and then we apply, and then we actually perceive Krishna in the sphere of our devotional activities. Prabhupada was once with his senior men, said, so how can we experience, how can we understand we're making progress in devotional service? How can we see Krishna? How can we understand Krishna? And all these different, the devotees all gave different answers, which were not wrong, but they weren't what Prabhupada wanted. He said, by following Shastra, like I just said, by, first doing duty and controlling the sense. And Prabhupada said, this is okay, but he says, we feel Krishna. We feel Krishna, and this is what Bhagavad Gita says, we feel Krishna in the sphere of our activities working. But we can only do that if we know how Krishna works from Shastra. Otherwise, we actually, Krishna will be there, we never even know. And this is explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam, this process of hearing. What's that verse now? Krishna spadam apagate, jnana jana debisa, kalo nashta dishtam esha, purana unadoditaha. When Krishna left this world, the sages were asking, where will we go for knowledge now that you're leaving? Where will we go for religious guidance and principles? Krishna spadam apagate. And he goes with knowledge, jnana debisaha. Hello, Krishna, Purana unadodita. Purana means illumination. And Krishna said, we go to Srimad Bhagavatam. Because Krishna is non-different from Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. And so our hearing process is a way we actually see. Unless we hear regularly, we'll never see Krishna in the sphere of our activities. And we'll never feel Krishna in the course of our activities. Because when we actually experience Krishna in our lives, that's when we become solid. Otherwise, it's just theoretical. We have to do that. We have to undergo the austerity of trying to understand Krishna, even if we're not an expert. Tesham satayuktam vajram paripurvakam, dadadi pariyogam yenamam upiyantite. To those who are dedicated to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. And Prabhupada explains in the purport that even if we can't, understand the scriptures from the spiritual master or understand the spiritual master's instructions, he says if we're sincere and we're trying, he says then, dadadi buddhi yogam yena mamupiyantite, dadadi buddhi yogam. So we, because of that devotional mood of trying, then Krishna reciprocates with that. Tesham evana kampatam hamajan tam tamha nasyamat bhavasto jnana dipena bhavashtaha. He illuminates the heart with knowledge. And when the heart becomes illuminated with knowledge, then it becomes soft. So, proper understanding is always necessary for any activity. So, especially devotional service. We want to understand something. If we want to understand how to obtain something, we have to understand the process. And then when we can understand the process, we can understand the weeds, the things that we may think is the process, but are not the process. They're actually diversions. So we're not as fortunate as that little boy. We don't have the Father in vision. And probably even if we did, we wouldn't actually be able to appreciate it. Otherwise, why should Krishna appear? But we can still hear Shrutekshita, Shrutekshit, Ikshita, Shrutekshita, by seeing through hearing. That's the word. And otherwise, we remain in darkness. Even though we're practicing devotional service, and if we're trying to understand Krishna, why will he reciprocate? In the beginning, we may not even want to try and understand Krishna, but we understand that, this is the way to go. I have no taste, but at least this is the way to go, and I'm following the authorities and I'm following the process. Then Krishna reciprocates with that. Carry on, do that. And this brings to mind, I went for a walk in Hough End playing fields again. This is my favourite haunt. I go there every day. Chant some japa. But this time I was coming out of the playing fields 2 days ago, and I passed this car and I heard this, Hare Krishna. And then looked at the car and there was this head popping out. All right. And you know, he was quite prepared to let me walk on. He just wanted to, you know, acknowledge. And so I felt a bit curious. I said, how do you know about Hare Krishna then? Have you been to the temple? He says, no. He says, you know, somebody told me a little bit. And then we got talking. I says, we're from Gloucestershire, because he seemed to have a, you know, a West Country accent. He said, no, I'm from Iran. Iran. Anyway, we're talking, and I said, how does Iran compare to England? And he said something really, which really surprised me. He said, they're suffering as much as in Iran as they are in England. And he's not a devotee. And I thought, wow, he's had a big realization. In other words, he says, he more or less saying, whatever I do, wherever I go, it's going to be the same. And so then we started, you know, a conversation. He was asking me questions, and he said he went up the road into Manchester to what he thought was our temple. I said, no, that's a Buddhist temple. He says, I asked a lot of questions, but, you know, I didn't get any answers. So he wasn't very pleased about that. And anyway, we spoke for some time, and he was very receptive. You know, probably in his 30s. And I gave him my number to ring and the address of the temple, so that at least he's got, you know, some contact. And what's the first thing what we should do if he comes to the temple? Well, not the first thing. Or before he leaves the temple.
Books.
Prasadam.
Prasadam.
Books.
He should be, you know, he should have a mouthful of prasadam at least, and he should have a handful of books, or at least one book. This is our goal, that, you know, wherever you know, we can speak to somebody for 5 minutes, and you know, probably 5% on it will gel. After a few weeks, you know, everything will be forgotten. But, you know, if we actually present Prabhupada's books, then, you know, they can actually read them anytime, and they can start to take up devotional service. This is our secret weapon in one respect. Prabhupada said these books are like time bombs. Take my example. You know, I started taking an interest in the devotees when I saw them on telly. I'll not go through the whole story, you've probably heard it 15 times, but anyway, eventually I got a book on the street in Rotherham, sunny Rotherham, and then I started reading it, talking about God, and so I put it down again. I was completely disgusted. I thought, I can't wade me through, you know, being brought up in a Christian religion, and I never got a straight answer from anybody, you know, and so I just became completely, you know, what's the word? Disillusioned. And so I thought, I'm not going to wade through a book and get the same answer. So anyway, a few years later, I picked it up, and I started reading, and I read a bit further, and I started taking an interest. You know, it took me, how long? It took me about 7 years after getting the book before I actually started to read it. And some people may not even do that. They may be like, they may just put it down and never pick it up again, and somebody else picks it up. So, you know, this is our prime way to preach, through books. And if the movement's going to grow, we have to tenaciously keep doing this. This has become our life. What does he call it, Vaisheshika? Our family business. This is our family business. We're a family of devotees, and our business is to distribute Srila Prabhupada's and Krishna's books. And Prabhupada said, if you do this, you'll never go without. He said, we can support ourselves by doing this, but we have to make an effort. And so, I don't know whether at this time of year, usually we're building up to what's going to be a Christmas marathon in a couple of months' time, but I don't know what it's going to be like this year. But, you know, we're from India, and in India, you've got to be what you've got, what's the word? What's a Kshatriya has got a different quality. One of them is resourceful. Is that right? You know, India's not an easy place. You have to be resourceful. Make the best use of a bad bargain. So we're making the best use of what seems to be a bad bargain at the moment. So we should all be getting our heads together, and we should be thinking how we can distribute books. Okay? So just think that, you know, your livelihood depends on distributing the books. Our spiritual livelihood depends on distributing these books. And we should get, I'm talking to Gaura Nataraj now, we should create a think tank. And we should, you know, because actually, you know, there's Madhava Kumar there, he's distributing books. So it's possible. And, you know, the thing is, did you know something? People want these books. You don't know it, but that's what they want. They're actually looking for these books. And a devotee's work is to find ways to actually make them understand this is what they actually want. We're going to have to point it a bit. We're talking about happiness. Well, you know, I was talking to this Iranian and he realized that there's no happiness. And it's true, you know, you name it, anything you do, will it make you happy for long? The thought of a thing that you're going to do makes you more happy than the actual thing that you do. I think this is a statement that I found to be true anyway. Yes, so if you don't, so there's one verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Sukaya dukkha mokshaya sankalpa iha kaminaha sarapnoti haya dukkam anihaya sukhavritam. So what's this verse saying? It's saying that in the material world, every materialistic person wants to increase his happiness and decrease his distress. And therefore, he acts in an appropriate way to do that. However, it says, one is happy in this world as long as he doesn't try to increase his happiness. That's strange, isn't it? The very thing that we think will make us happy will make us more miserable. So, you know, one's happy in this world. In other words, we have to remain neutral. We have to accept whatever good, like this verse was saying, we accept whatever good or bad comes, and we remain neutral, and we carry on trying to actually increase our devotional service. And that's the only thing to consider. Everything else will come and go. Our situation will come and go. Whatever the situation is, it won't last. But there's one thing that will last, and that's service. So this is it. So this is the first instruction in the Bhagavad Gita. We have to tolerate. Not tolerate just by gritting his teeth, but tolerate with knowledge, with this knowledge that we're getting the resultant reactions of things from the past, and there's nothing we can do about it. Sometimes it'll be good or apparently good. Sometimes it'll seem the opposite. But just take it in your stride and carry on with service. And then what happens? We're in the water of the, you know, it's like we're being tossed from one situation to another, like in the ocean. We've got no control. What does Prabhupada say? If you want to get out of the ocean, you do it by transcendental consciousness. That means even though we're in the ocean of material distress, you know, our intelligence and our mind is actually somewhere else. We're not in the ocean of distress. We're actually serving the lotus feet of Krishna. And it takes practice. We keep practicing devotional service through every situation, And eventually we become transcendental. It's the things are happening, but they not really have any consequence, even though they may affect us, not for long. Just like Prahlad Maharaj, he was only 5 years old, and he developed his transcendental consciousness. Dhruva Maharaj, same. So we should avoid wanting to be happy. It says in Bhagavad Gita, it says yad agre vishayam. He said that which in the beginning seems like nectar, seems like happiness, in the end seems like poison, is material consciousness of enjoying. It's called the mode of passion. Let me enjoy. That's why I say don't try to enjoy. It's a mode of passion. Opposite of that is using our intelligence to analyze the situation. And that's yat tat agre vishayam. That's poison in the beginning, controlling the senses, trying to understand it's a hard work in the beginning. But if we do that, it says then, eva parimane amrita. And then there's actually nectar. So what's that? What's those two words? There's prayas and shreyas. Prayas is immediate enjoyment, not recommended. Shreyas is spiritual enjoyment. I remember spiritual enjoyment. I remember I was listening to one tape by Gaur Govinda Maharaj. And, you know, his understanding of this verse, that one is short-term enjoyment, one is long-term enjoyment. And he said, what is prayas? You know how he talks, and somebody answered and says, what is shreyas? And somebody said, long-term enjoyment. He said, what? He says, no, it's spiritual, spiritual enjoyment. So in other words, the only long-term, short-term, don't try and be long-term happy. You know, this is not correct either. Shreyas means spiritual enjoyment. And if we develop, you know, the proper consciousness, we can have that spiritual enjoyment immediately. Okay. And then, what does it say in Bhagavad Gita? It says that, let me read it. .247. Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityur dhruvam janma mitasya cha tasmat aparihare arte natram sojtim arasi. One who has taken his birth is sure to die. And after death, one is sure to take birth again. Therefore, in the unavoidable discharge of your duty, you should not lament. We have a duty. It's our duty to serve Krishna. This human form of life is the form which we can rehabilitate that relationship. It's the only duty we really have. So Krishna's saying to Arjuna, whatever, Arjuna's got a horrible duty, he has to kill. We don't have to do that. What Krishna's saying, this is your particular duty. Therefore, don't worry about it. You know, all things must pass. We are born and eventually we're going to die. So in that interim period, we should, you know, not lament and just do our duty. Prabhupada said like discipline, like spiritual discipline, like being in the army. But actually, when we do, just by that initial effort to control the senses and do the right things, we get so much pleasure, so much relief. Just by hearing the philosophy, we get so much relief. You know, it says in Srimad Bhagavatam that simply by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, just by, as soon as one starts to hear Srimad Bhagavatam, he immediately is freed from all distress. And not only that, he actually loses his envy of other living entities, at least for the time being, if we're actually hearing. So this is our work in this world, not to enjoy. If we're actually in the mood of trying to get immediate enjoyment from something, we should check ourselves and do what the due. It may be that Prabhupada says in second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, you know, the regulative principles of freedom are that a devotee, if Krishna wants, he'll do something he wouldn't ordinarily want to do. And if Krishna does not want, he won't do something he would ordinarily do. So that means we follow the instructions of Krishna and the spiritual master and do what they want us to do. And in that way, we actually avoid being caught up in trying to be happy. And then we actually become happy. So easier said than done, but it takes practice. And what facilitates this is by doing the thing that we need to do first, is this chanting of the holy name. If we actually hear this Maha Mantra and we let it, absorb in our consciousness, this won't be a problem to follow these particular guidelines which are given by our acharyas. So I don't know whether to finish there, whether there'll be any questions or not, but I have to go at 5:30, so I will finish there. And if there's anything anybody wants to ask, I have time to answer. Basically, In Pursuit of Happiness was the title. So, you know, the conclusion is that happiness is there. Even if we don't do anything, sometimes we'll feel happy and sometimes we'll feel distressed. That's, you know, so why actually endeavor? Has anybody that experience? Sometimes you feel happy and you don't know why. And then the next minute you're as miserable as sin, you know. Same situation. And we think it's something we've done. It's not necessarily that. It's something which we're actually due to and we're just getting, you know, the result. You know, any questions from anybody? Is there any YouTube followers today?
Yes, Maharaj, there are 8 viewers on YouTube.
Oh, YouTube.
Yes. So we got 16 here and then 8 there. No comments so far on YouTube, Maharaj.
All right.
So thank you very much, Maharaj, for sharing some of the wonderful jewels from Srila Prabhupada books. And
One thing here, one thing.
Sure.
Raj Tandon, which Raj Tandon is that? Will the real Raj Tandon please stand up?
Danvas Maharaj.
Which, it's not the one I thought it was. There's another Raj Tandon. Are you're not the husband of Amita Tandon, are you?
We are related distantly.
All right. Because
This is
oh,
me, Maharaj.
I know. Of course.
We are related very distantly, but
Well, they call her husband. It's anyway.
you're thinking of Raj Kapoor,
No, Raj Kapoor is Amita Tandon's,
brother.
but she has a husband, and that's how she gets the name Tandon.
Yes, we are related.
Okay. Anyway, I'm sure everybody's enlivened by that piece of information. So, hopefully we'll meet again.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Okay. Thank you very much, Maharaj. Appreciate, and thank you everyone for tuning in. Hare
Hare
Krishna. Hare Bol.
Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.